Okay, so hopefully you are all seeing now How to Raise an Adult. This is August's book club by Julie Lythcott-Haims. Sorry, I've been calling her Julia. It's Julie. She is a former dean at Stanford, and we should all want to hear what she has to say about raising kids in our modern world where it feels so much like there's so much competition and that we're up against a lot and we want to prepare them the best we can. But in doing the things that we think are going to help, there's a lot of evidence that we're actually doing harm. So, without further ado, let's just kind of dive in. I'm Dr. Marissa Caudill. If this is your first book club, welcome. You can learn more about me at theparentdoctor.com. I have a free weekly newsletter, this book club, which is free every month. I offer courses and coaching for parents. I have a podcast, which I'll show you next, and I am a psychiatrist and therapist in private practice for California residents. So if you are interested in listening to the podcast, it's called the Parent Doctor Podcast. You can find it on Apple and Spotify and all the places where you would find a podcast. Oh, I just realized you guys are not hearing this. Sorry about that. Basically, this is the office hours is a new thing I'm offering. First Fridays of the month, I'm going to be hopping on a Zoom. You can sign up here, and basically you can submit questions to me directly via text or email at hello@theparentdoctor.com. So as you're with your kids, something comes up. It's not to the level that you would probably make an appointment with your pediatrician or schedule an appointment with a child psychiatrist, but it's something that's a problem for you or that's bugging you or that you don't know how to handle. You would just send a message to me and I will address it at the next office hours. The cost to be part of this is just $29 a month for the first 50 people who sign up. And I think it's a great resource because I know everywhere I go, when I tell people I'm a child psychiatrist, they're like, hey, can I ask you a question? We all have questions about our kids. What's normal? What's not normal? How should we handle certain frustrating situations? And I am happy to weigh in on those things. So go to officehours.theparentdoctor.com/sign up if you would like to be in the in crowd and be part of that. The first one will be coming, or yeah, the next one will be coming out the first Friday in September. Okay, so let's get to this book. Julie Lythcott-Haims' book, How to Raise an Adult, addresses the pervasive issue of overparenting. Now, I don't consider myself a helicopter parent, but I had to be honest with myself. And as I was reading this book, realized that there are many ways that I overparent. And I think that's because it's become the norm. A good parent is encouraged by society these days to do things for their child that they don't need to be doing and that in fact they probably shouldn't be doing. And this book really discusses the impact on kids as they grow up and makes us question kind of at what point are we going to stop doing these things. It gives practical advice on how to foster resilience in our children, problem solving skills, critical thinking, and self reliance, and to advocate for a more balanced approach, encouraging parents to step back and allow their kids to take ownership of their own lives, ultimately preparing them better for success in adulthood. The key themes are overparenting, as I stated, a parenting style with excessive control and involvement, which can limit a child's ability to develop essential life skills. Now, this might include things that you don't think of as overparenting. For me, the things that stood out were I realized that I am doing things for my kids that they can do for themselves, like putting away their clean laundry, doing their laundry, making them breakfast, making their lunches, like all of these little things day to day that I take on in the name of freeing them up to enjoy life or study more or whatever, excel academically, ultimately are really robbing them of a sense of autonomy and accomplishment. And far better than to come at your kids and say, like, these are your chores and you have to do them the way my parents did, is to encourage your kids to step up. I think we find when we open the door and we ask for their help, they're more than happy to do it most of the time. So again, you don't want to say, from now on, I'm done doing these things for you, you little brat. That's not the way to go about it. Instead, you want to say, like, hey, I've been realizing I've been doing things that you really can do for yourself. I know that probably since I've been doing them for 47 years, I'm a little better and faster at them than you are, but I want you to get good at these things too. So from now on in the morning, you're going to be in charge. I told my kids they're in charge of emptying the clean dishes from the dishwasher every morning. They can do that jointly as a team, checking the trash. And my older son is to take out the trash if it's full. And then they're in charge of getting their breakfasts and packing their lunches. I let them know if they need help with any of that, I'm available to them, but it's their responsibility. And as the school year starts, it's their responsibility to make sure that we leave on time so that I don't have to keep saying, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And I bought them both alarm clocks and I don't wake them up. So I encourage you to think about the low-hanging fruit in your own relationship with your children. What are the things that they could be doing? And recognize as you pass this baton of responsibility to them, there will be times at the beginning when they mess up, when they need some support. kind of like we'll do this later, we'll show you this later, but you show them how to do it, you do it with them, and then you hand over the baton and you support them when they fail. And over time, with repetition, they're going to get better and better. And this leads to independence, right? The ability for children to make decisions and solve problems on their own, which is crucial for building confidence and resilience. And it increases the chance of long-term success because they can then persist and think of ways to solve problems that will help them achieve long-term goals, feel more fulfilled, and feel more confident. All right, the overparenting trap. In the 1980s, I was born in 77, so definitely this rang true with me. I remember, I forget the name of the child they talk about it in the book, but some kid was abducted and it was on all the milk cartons, right? So there was this increased fear of stranger danger and child endangerment due to the media coverage of this boy who was abducted. And then on top of that, layered on top was this whole self-esteem movement where everybody got a trophy for participating. And the combination of these things really led us as a society to overparent and overprotect our kids. We now view kids acting independently as dangerous. When I was a kid, I used to walk from my house, the local corner store with my sister when we were probably 6 and 10, or we would ride our bike. And it's not a busy place in New Hampshire, but still, it was a road that didn't have sidewalks. Cars would go like 40 miles an hour. It was with hills and turns, so it wasn't great visibility. I think if I lived in that neighborhood today, I would be reluctant to let my kids go alone to this location of the corner store, which was about a mile away. When I see kids in my hometown who are like under the age of older teenagers walking around, I instantly think, where are their parents? And I think we all need to kind of chill about that and realize that it's okay for kids at probably age 8 and up to be out and about on their own if their parent feels that they're responsible enough. That's a call that their parent should be able to make. But we basically will view that as dangerous. Kids have become exquisite, precious, yet incapable as a result of all this. I want to talk about perceived risk versus reality. We, in fact, as a nation, have become safer since 1997 to 2011, and certainly safer than the 80s when that child was abducted. There was a 30% decline in child abductions overall, and fewer than 115 kids every year in America are abducted by strangers. Most child abductions are not true abductions. They're like custody battles or family members taking a child away from a situation they don't feel is right. So it's a known person taking a child who feels they have the right to the child. The risk of death by a stranger to our kids is 1 in a million, less than 1 in a million. Whereas the risk of death in an equestrian accident is 1 in 297,000 kids, youth football, 1 in 78,000 kids, and as a passenger in a car, 1 in 17,625 kids. So our brains just kind of can't get around this, right? Like, I have no problem putting my kid as a passenger in my car or a friend's car, but I do have a problem sending my kid on a mission in our city to like go buy a gallon of milk at the corner store down the street. In fact, kids are 56 times more likely to die as a passenger in a car than they would be abducted by a stranger. Yet, in 2014, you probably remember this press, there was a mother arrested in South Carolina for letting her 9-year-old play at a park while she worked a shift at McDonald's. This was in the summer. This mom could not afford summer camp. The kid was bored of sitting in the McDonald's while her mom worked. And so her mom said, okay, I'm going to drop you at this park. The park was a 6-minute walk from their home. The child had a cell phone and knew how to get home and had a key to get home. And she said, just play at the park. When you're bored, you can go home. And someone reported the mom. She got arrested. It was a whole press case about it. There are 14 states that have laws on the books saying there's a minimum age for a child to be left at home alone. I think this is kind of silly because kids are very different. And an 18-year-old child with developmental delay should not be left home alone, but there could very well be a 6-year-old child who could stay home alone for a short time while their parent runs an errand safely. Most states, though, just have a rule of thumb that's generally in the 14 to 16 age range. I think that's really old. My kids are, one's about to be 12 and the other one's about to be 8. And we have no problem leaving them alone. Again, a little different because we live in an apartment building. But even when we were living in a house, I didn't have a problem leaving them at home. If I was going to go walk the dog and be gone for 15 minutes, if I had to run a quick errand to a neighbor's house, I left them home alone. I don't think I would have left them home alone all day, but that's my call as a parent. And I think you should feel emboldened to make that call for yourself as well. Kids now have less freedom than we did as adults, or sorry, as kids, less freedom than their parents did when they were children, and way less freedom than their grandparents had. The result of all of this is that we underestimate today's children and we rob them of the pride that comes from work and failure, and we cultivate mistrust So is it little wonder that ultimately the result is we're seeing more depression and more anxiety in our children. And it also leads to an unhealthy identity overlap between parents and kids. We feel like it's our job to monitor our kids' academic tasks and progress. We now have these online portals, right? And parents can access it and almost in real time can see their kids' grades. In the book, Dr. Hames talks about a mom who knew her child had failed their math test before the child had even learned of the grade and was texting the kid to say, what the heck happened? And the kid was texting back while in school saying, like, Mom, give me a break. I'm in a different class taking notes. Like, I didn't even know I failed the test. I tried my best. I thought I did well. So there is this weirdness now about our modern world with all of its technology that we can really know a lot. And that requires a lot more self-restraint on our part as parents then to not use that information or to not even look at it and to let our kids be in charge of their academics. We schedule and supervise their activities, we shuttle them everywhere, and we offer an outpouring of praise along the way. As a result, parents are overwhelmed. We are doing a lot. We feel the pressure of their pressure, and kids are overwhelmed. So here's an interesting study. In 2007, they asked a bunch of 18 to 25-year-olds what constitutes adulthood. And these were the top 4 factors. Number 1 was accepting responsibility for the consequences of action. Number 2 was establishing a relationship with parents as an equal adult. Number 3 was being financially independent from parents. And number 4 was deciding on beliefs, values, independently of parents and other people. Have these 18 to 25-year-olds, in their own opinion, achieved these milestones? Only 16% of them said that they felt that they were adults. So at age 25, only 16% of people felt like adults. I think we're failing them if that's the case. So we need to build life skills. I'm a physician. One of the mantras as physicians is do one, see one, teach one. And we have to apply that same skill to our kids. As I said before, we want to start by doing things for our kids, doing the laundry, folding the clothes, putting them away, whatever. Then we want to do it with them. Know that this will slow you down, right? If you want to make dinner with your kid, it's going to take you longer than it would to do it alone. If you want to do laundry with your child and fold laundry with your child, it's going to take longer than it would do for you to laundry by yourself. Same with shopping, same with all the things. We have to be patient, therefore, in order to make this work. Once we've done it with them, then we pass the baton. We let them do it alone, and we do not criticize. We just thank them. And I think then we ask them, what do you think of the job that you've done? And how do you think you could do it better? That's better than telling them what they did wrong, what they missed, what they need to do differently next time. Ask them if they can identify those ways to improve on their own to help them learn optimization. All right, so I can't read my slides. Evolving standards of parenting and child independence. As I said before, kids have less independence in this day and age than they did in prior generations. We shield our children from even minor discomforts, and we struggle to tolerate natural consequences. I remember being on the playground with my kids when they were young, and maybe at some point you need to do this. Like if you have a 1-year-old and you're waiting and waiting and waiting for the swings, maybe as a parent you say like, do you think we could have the next turn? But what I've seen very commonly is that a child who absolutely has a voice and an able body at age 4, 5, 6 has a parent who will step in when they think something is unjust and say like, it's Joey's turn now on the swing. He's been waiting, and not let the child say that for themselves. So I think we really have to let our kids find their own voice, speak up for what they need, and step back. So if they come to us asking for help in situations, we need to ask them like, oh, that sounds frustrating. Like, how do you think you can solve this problem, rather than being the solution ourselves? Other examples are allowing our kids to experience natural consequences. So if they forget their homework assignment and they message you or the school calls you, Johnny forgot his homework assignment, your response shouldn't be like, oh, I'll get it to you on my lunch break or I'll drive it over right away. It should be, okay, well, why don't you problem solve with Johnny and find out how he's going to handle that with his teacher, right? Like, it's not an emergency, and their problem should not become your problem. So same, if they miss their jacket, forget it, and they're cold, and they come home and they're complaining, or they text you and they're complaining, well, that's a learning experience, right? They're not going to die of hypothermia, most likely. And so you can just let them know like, okay, how do you think you can better prepare to prevent this from happening again? So overprotectiveness can really hinder a child's ability to develop resilience and independence and planning skills. The role of failure. This is one of the pillars that I teach parents, embracing failure. It's so important that we normalize, that we tell our own stories of failure to our kids, that we allow our children the opportunity to fail without making them feel ashamed when they've done so, and instead help them see that that failure is a learning opportunity for future growth. Perfection is the lowest standard we can teach our children because it's impossible to achieve. So we should not expect perfection from ourselves or from our kids. My favorite chapter in this book, and if you only read one, it's chapter 21. It's called Reclaim Yourself. So as a parent doctor, I'm very passionate about helping parents reclaim their identity. You can see down here the statistic: parents experience depression at twice the rate of the general adult population. And this is partly because we lose ourselves when we have kids. It's become normal to put our kids' needs ahead of our own. And as Carl Jung said, nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. So if there is something in your own life that you are not doing that you feel you want to do, if there's some purpose that you feel you're not fulfilling, but you feel it's your mission to fulfill it, I want you to prioritize making that happen. And I want you to be an example to your children as they're going through their process of figuring out what their life is going to mean, what kind of life they want to have, what kind of work they want to do, and talk to them about how you feel about the work you're doing. If you have a job, whether that's being a stay-at-home parent or working in an employed job or working self-employed or running a business, whatever it is, talk to them about why that's important to you. And if you feel that in some ways it hasn't completely fulfilled you, talk to them about that too. Talk to them about what you really would like to do and how you're going to make that happen. That's an extremely powerful thing that you can do for your kids. We must be strong for our children, putting on our oxygen mask before we put on theirs, right? So prioritizing yourself is not selfish. It's absolutely becoming a strong leader for your kids and being that strong leader that they need. A parent's well-being can't be dependent on whether the child is having a bad day. This is a quote from the book that I highlighted that I really, really strongly agree with. Be passionate about your kid, but don't let your kid be your passion. If you let your kid be your passion, they feel the weight of that, and their success becomes your happiness, which is very unhealthy for them. So kids who's become addicts, and I've personally seen this from my experience working with kids in residential treatment centers who have addiction problems, but this was also in the book talked about. There's an organization that's been around for decades called Beit Shuva here in Los Angeles. It's a recovery organization. They see the same pattern. Parents who raise children where the parent is unable to allow the children to experience distress have kids whose ability to tolerate challenges they raise kids who are weak in their ability to tolerate challenges and setbacks and hardships because their parents never gave them that opportunity. And so what do? They turn to drugs to escape the fact that they constantly feel like a failure and the fact that life always feels overwhelming for them. Academic pressure is overrated. Many chapters in the book talk about this, talk about, the race to get our kids to the best colleges, the US News rankings. There's a chapter where she gives a lot of great alternatives to the US News rankings and talks about why they're a bit stacked, right? Like the deck is kind of stacked. There's a lot of manipulation that goes into the ranking of the US News best schools. The bottom line here is like we need to chill out as parents. Where our kids go to college, if they go to college even, is not the end all be all. And it could be a better idea for our kids to be a big fish in a small sea. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in his book Outliers. He recommends that really gifted kids don't try to get into the biggest and best schools necessarily because they're more likely to be average or below average compared to their peers. They basically could fill Stanford with like all valedictorians who have perfect SAT scores. So clearly academically, those kids are all excellent, right? They have way more than enough qualified applicants. And at those best schools where there are so many applications, even if your kid is stellar, even if your kid absolutely could be chosen, is qualified, their chances of getting in are less than 5%. So we have to be realistic about the fact that some of these schools are insanely competitive, and that is okay. It doesn't mean your kid can't apply there if it's a school that really appeals to them, but it does mean that they shouldn't have their heart set on it, and nor should you. And we really need to have an open mind about other opportunities where our child might be able to thrive. And there are many schools where they might get great one-to-one faculty support and maybe even more one-to-one faculty support than they would at a Stanford or a Yale or Harvard or a Princeton. Appendix A in the book has a list of all the colleges students attended who were matriculating into the Harvard Law School class in, I think, 2017. And if you get the book from your local library, or if you own it, flip to that and look at it, and you'll be surprised. It's an extremely diverse list of colleges. There were colleges there I'd never even heard of. We have over 2,800 colleges in America. There are so many opportunities. And basically, if we put too much pressure on our kids, it's going to backfire. It's going to backfire in their self-esteem and in our sense of accomplishment. And we really have to, from a young age, understand this and talk to our kids about it. Okay, we have to teach our kids to not be afraid to sweat, not be afraid to fail, and not give up. How do you do that? Well, it's easier said than done, of course, but I think we do it by leading by example and talking to them about how our achievements are related to these three qualities, and to encourage them when they do these things, encourage them when they put in hard work and they fail. That's a good thing that they should feel proud of, even if they didn't get first place, even if they didn't get an A. We want to notice that they worked hard and that they weren't afraid to fail. And even if they knew someone else was likely to win the award or do better than them, they still put in their best effort, and that's great. And let them know that we're all at our own place, right? Like when we compare ourselves to another person, we may be comparing ourselves to someone who's been doing what we're learning for years and years more than we have. And that's not a fair comparison. No one can tell you how far you'll go with continuous effort and persistence. Okay, this is a long slide, but I think it's important. So he talks in one of the chapters, sorry, I didn't write which one, about this test called a PISA. And it basically is a test that evaluates critical thinking. And generally speaking, US students do pretty poorly on this. Not all, but most US students do very poorly on this. Whereas in other cultures, students do better. We're really a society that, especially in the last 20, 30 years, has shifted to educating children to pass a test rather than to educate children to think critically. And we really, as parents, therefore, especially if your child is in public schools where they're doing No Child Left Behind kind of testing, we need to do our part at home in our time with our kids to increase their ability to think critically and to solve problems. Have debates with them at the kitchen table where you take two sides of a situation and present it to each other and talk through it, and then switch sides and see if your child can be flexible in their thinking and think of ideas that you didn't about the side that you had previously represented. That will be an exercise to boost their critical thinking skills. As I said before, the role of purpose is so, so important when it comes to academic success, when it comes to financial success, when it comes to employed success or self-employed success or running a business. Feeling that you're doing it for some reason that's greater than you is the biggest propellant that there can be. It's the biggest source of energy that there will ever be. So we want to encourage our kids to discover their own sense of purpose. We can't give it to them. I can't tell you, and no one can tell you what you should love and feel passionate about, right? It's just not possible. You might learn about something and think, oh yeah, I'm really passionate about that. But it wouldn't be the case that someone could just tell you this is what you should really be passionate about. There's so many wonderful things that we could choose to be passionate about. We have to find what resonates with us as individuals. And the same is true for our kids. We have to give them that space to find out what their purpose is. And statistics show that only 20% of young people manage to find something truly significant to dedicate their lives to. This is normal. So if your kid is feeling lost and they're not sure what they want to do, that's normal. But just encourage them to continue to look for it and don't just give up and decide that they want someone else's version of success to dictate their decisions and their choices in life. They should remain open to a sense of something that will be very purposeful for them. Many of us don't find this until our adulthood. Many of us don't find it ever because eventually we give up looking for it. So talk about it with your children. Let them know that it's important and let them engage deeply with the things that they're passionate about, even if it goes in misalignment with what you think they should be doing, ideally. All right, so in conclusion, we want to foster independence, resilience, and self-sufficiency in kids. This is worthwhile and it's necessary. Our ultimate goal is to raise well-rounded, capable adults who can thrive and make decisions confidently without relying on constant input from others. We want to let our kids manage their own challenges and learn from their experiences. Doing so prepares them. And I'm going to give you all a PDF with instructions to identify the top 3 areas of improvement that you're going to be working on in the coming weeks and months. All right, everybody. did pretty good there with time. Take care. See you next